Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the digitally digested segment, for the Microsoft Surface 2. So this is the second generation Surface tablet. Of course, this is not the Pro version, which is a full-blown laptop in tablet form. However, this does still give you a very solid extension of the Windows 8.1 experience. We are running Windows 8.1 RT, even though the RT name has been dropped. You can pick up this tablet in two different storage capacities, 32 or 64. The pricing is $450 and $550 respectively. You can also pick up the type or touch cover accessory, which I'll be talking about a little bit later. This is the type cover that does have backlight capability as well, which is a nice touch. Microsoft really putting their best foot forward in this product, in my opinion. So ideally, at this price point, they are clearly, by they, Microsoft, taking on Apple and Android tablets as best as they possibly can. They tried this with the RT generation, that was the first gen last year, and clearly marketing has changed, as has basically everything about this tablet. We still have the same operating system, but we do have the improvement of 8.1, which includes the reincorporation of the start button, at least when you're in desktop mode. And that does give you quite a bit more capability when it comes to actually feeling like you are, again, back in a Windows environment, especially one reminiscent of more of a 7 experience, even though I do prefer the 8.1 experience. For those of you who felt that Windows 8 was missing that start button and clear quick access to a whole host of different controls, you now have that. But the desktop environment, even though you cannot actually install full-blown desktop applications, is still something that I think is welcoming to a lot of users who've been frustrated by the fact that they purchase so many different tablets, Apple or Android alike, that simply don't end up achieving their goal, which is to emulate a computer-like experience. So if that's what you're after, Windows, Microsoft really has done a very nice job, at least in this generation. I can't say the same for the original Surface RT, but here we really do have a very solid blend of build, processor capability, as well as now software. Granted, the Windows Store for applications is still relatively limited at a little over 100,000 apps. It's still a very solid platform overall, which in my mind speaks to the fact that eventually this is going to end up being one of the best platforms that you can possibly buy into. Overall, Surface 2 as well as Surface Pro 2 do represent some best-in-breed hardware. And Surface 2 is a prime example of that. The Tegra 4 quad-core processor that's in here is one of the best performers in the market. Now, by market, I'm referring to mobile rather than desktop class, of course. This is not something you're going to find in a laptop. This is something you're going to find in another smartphone or tablet. And when it comes to that sort of comparison, the Tegra 4 simply flies. And that's part of the reason that this version of the Surface, the second generation, really is such a vast improvement over the original. The Tegra 3, which was also a quad-core chip, was capable for its time, but was definitely late in the game when it came to taking on a brand new product like Surface. When Microsoft announced Surface, I was frankly surprised that it wasn't starting with the Tegra 4 rather than the Tegra 3. I'm not saying the 4 was in existence, but in terms of the roadmap, they were definitely late. But when it comes to web browsing, using Microsoft Office, which is, by the way, completely included in this because you do get a full Microsoft Office suite, so you get Outlook preloaded, Excel, PowerPoint. These are all things that a lot of people actually need. So if you're one of those people that not only enjoys the Windows environment, wants it in a tablet form factor, respects the fact that you're not going to be able to actually run full-blown desktop applications, but you do require Office, and you do require a Flash browser, which, by the way, you do get in the form of Internet Explorer in the desktop mode. Granted, it's not as seamless. You'll have to pull up the keyboard. It's a little bit cumbersome. It's somewhere in between a computer and tablet experience. But for people who really want the best of both worlds in simply a tablet form, unlike Surface Pro 2, which is really both, you are going to get it here in Surface 2. The only real limitation to this piece of hardware, to this tablet, is that application store, or lack thereof applications in that store. So overall, really impressed with everything this does. The Tegra 4 really is, as I mentioned, best in class. 2 gigs of RAM, In this case, 32 gigs of storage, which Windows 8.1 does actually take up quite a bit of space, so I recommend going with the 64 gig if you actually find that you feel you're going to need more internal storage capacity. You do have a micro SD card slot right here on the back behind the new and improved kickstand, which, by the way, I do happen to like a lot. You would think it's a minor upgrade to go from just this simple position to expanding it to a 40-degree angle, but it really is a tremendous improvement. And then you can see the micro SD card slot is tucked away right there. So you can expand storage here easily up to 64 gigs as per Microsoft. The webcams here have also been improved. I mean, everything about this tablet, I already mentioned the improvement in the processor, the screen, even the RAM, I believe, is faster. So Microsoft really looking to transform this generation of Surface into a whole nother product. And I think they've accomplished that, even though it looks a lot alike when compared to the first generation. They have changed the color, made it a little bit slimmer, a little bit lighter. The kickstand change, as well as other ergonomic changes, design cues, really do lend itself to a more polished and finished product. Unlike the Surface Pro 2, where very little has changed outside of what's underneath the hood, this the Surface 2 has really been improved both internally and externally. Better cameras, 5 megapixels on the rear, 3 on the front. And again, the screen is really just one of the best that I've seen on any tablet. Now, in terms of speaker performance, as I just touched the volume rocker there, I would say that it's definitely right up there with all of the tablets that Microsoft is aiming to compete with. Strong output, relatively solid. They do get a little bit distorted at the high end when they top out, but that's not uncommon for speakers in a mobile device like this. Tablet in this form factor generally will offer a mixed bag when it comes to speaker performance, even at the higher end price point that this represents. So the speakers, in my opinion, are pretty solid, definitely better than the original Surface RT, but again, that just lends itself to the fact that everything here is better than Generation 1. The only thing, as I mentioned before, is again that application store. In terms of other websites to browse to, as I mentioned, full flash here, so everything's going to work just as it would on a actual computer. So this is where this tablet really shines and does something that no other can. Now, is this a big bragging right? Well, for many users, no. They're not even interested in Flash. But part of the reason Flash is attractive on Surface 2 is that unlike what many experience in Android, there is no laggy experience. There is no cumbersome experience that's going to follow through. In fact, that's part of the reason that Flash has been dropped. It's no longer supported and developed for. Whereas here, if you really do strive to not replace that experience you get from your traditional laptop or desktop computer, you're going to be able to retain it. Of course, this isn't going to be critical to everyone, but again, Microsoft is betting that you are a Windows user and you don't want to give up what your computer can do. And that's what Surface 2 really, again, represents. Even though it can't install full-blown desktop programs, it does everything else the way a Windows system would, especially under the brand new 8.1 update, which I really do like. For everyone, again, as I mentioned earlier, that was a critic of Windows 8 originally, I think 8.1 really does address just about every complaint that you could feasibly have. So you get Office, you get a desktop environment that you're not going to find on any other tablet, but clearly that's going to be a matter of personal preference. Do you need the productivity? In terms of battery life, this also hangs with all the bad boys. Again, you're going to get a full day's use out of this. It's also going to take an equally long time to charge, at least in my experience. But that Tegra 4 processor really is best in class, at least for the time being. I've been using it in the Shield for quite a while, and that's an NVIDIA, reference piece of hardware there based around their own processor, and it runs incredibly well. So no surprise here that I'm seeing equally as astonishing performance. The real shocker is just how stable and reliable RT has become as a tablet platform. I think that this blows away any expectations you could possibly have from Microsoft in the tablet space. The overall performance of the device, again, matches everything. It's just the applications, this is now the third time I'm mentioning it, that fall short. Facebook is here. there's talk of much more development over the course of 2014, but until it's there, I'm not sure that Microsoft can get a lot of people on board. So it really boils down to, do you need what this has to offer? Is $450 the price you're willing to pay to get a Windows experience in the form of a tablet, incredible build quality, fantastic screen, one of the best you're going to get on any tablet, no question about it. Also, very good cameras. That's another thing I want to point out. This isn't a bad combo in terms of the front and rear cameras, something that often will be neglected. You do have a Windows button here also, much like the previous generation, and of course Surface Pro 2, and it works as expected. Multitasking really absolutely not a problem on this tablet at all. In fact, that's one of the areas it shines. But the multitasking is limited to what you can really do with RT as a platform. Again, you're not going to have as full blown applications even in the offerings that exist right now for RT. A lot of the apps are shrunken down, limited versions compared to what's available for Android and iOS. So that's still a major advantage. The irony that the world's largest software manufacturer, developer, is having a problem filling software. It is ironic, and unfortunately it's true, but I do think that's going to change. This isn't some startup trying to throw their hat into the tablet arena. This is one of the largest companies in the world, and if anyone has the money to continue to pump into the Surface brand, and specifically the RT brand, which I know Microsoft really does see as the future, really the blend of everything into one device, because after all, mobile computing is taking over, no question about it. I can see why this would be a really good place to start. Incredible build quality, no dead pixels, even less backlight bleed than the Surface Pro 2. Again, speaking to that, this is a better made device, dare I say it, because of the redesign that it got as opposed to the Pro. Again, I'm not comparing the internal hardware, I'm just talking about build quality and screen quality. I did notice in my testing that the Surface 2 did have, at least in my opinion, a better overall 10.6-inch display than the what many would think is identical 10.6-inch clear type display in the Surface Pro 2. But I think we are looking at a revamped panel here, or at least it's coming out of a different factory. I'll say that much than what we're getting out of the Pro 2. And you can see that in color reproduction, as well as slightly in viewing angles, but viewing angles are still really solid on both tablets, so I'm not knocking the Pro 2. It's really in color reproduction and color accuracy. So overall, it really comes down to, are you willing to spend that $450 or $550 in order to have Office, in order to have Skype, SkyDrive, all of the comforts, again, of the Windows OS without the ability of taking complete advantage, but at least in a tablet form, certainly outclassing and overpowering any other tablet that's trying to act the way a Windows computer would, which many would argue the Asus Transformer Android-driven tablets were really trying to be clearly computers. So that was, if there was ever a cue for Microsoft to try to make something exactly in that form, we're looking at it here today. Now I'm going to take the camera out a little bit wider in order to show off that accessory that I think is pretty much a must-have for either the Surface 2 or Surface Pro 2, and that's the Type keyboard. And that's because, as you can see, instantly just locks in through the magnetic pogo ports. You can then flip out the kickstand, and you're good to go from a productivity standpoint. And you have a pretty good range of flexibility. And another important area is that I mentioned you do have a backlit keyboard now. So backlighting is present, something that was vacant from the first generation. You can't see it here and now because the lights are on, it's blending in. But I have already done a segment specifically on the Type cover. So if you're interested in learning more about that, go ahead and check out that video. It does sense your hand, so it'll actually manage the backlighting for power control, which is definitely a good thing. This way, a little bit more battery life, however much it squeaks out or squeezes out, certainly is a good thing. And the touchpad works relatively well too. You do have multi-touch here for gestures and navigation, and it is about as fluid as you're going to get. Normally in these sort of compromised keyboard situations, the touchpads are just awful. I have to say Microsoft has done a relatively nice job on this. And this is another big enhancement in the second generation of the Surface lineup, because they really, not head to toe, but redesigned even the finish. We now have a cloth finish here on the type cover, so things are clearly different in just about every way. Shortcut keys are there that you're going to need on a day-to-day basis, whether you're adjusting brightness, volume, you want to search, share, get into settings, whatever it may be, you have access. So really, is this a productivity machine? If you have the type cover, I can tell you without a question, you're going to be able to get more work done on this sort of tablet than an Android or iOS tablet, in my opinion, simply because of the full-blown desktop class browsing capability, which arguably can replace just about any application that you would want to seek out. Of course, applications bring convenience that desktop browsers do not, and that's part of the reason that there's such a tremendous shift towards mobile devices and app use. But if you can work with that desktop class browser, if you need that, and you need a backlit keyboard with actual keys that actually press, and I have to say, work relatively well. In my experience, they are accurate. I'm not finding mispresses. It takes some time to actually get accustomed to the keyboard because it's not quite full size. It's matching that 10.6-inch display that it's paired with. But overall, really a very pleasant typing experience once you're used to it. And the touchpad, again, for scrolling really does function nicely, in my opinion. It's something that doesn't necessarily have to work, but in this case, it does. And it's just a nice added bonus of having everything work as it should, which is something we don't often see with different devices out of the box. Of course, higher expectations from Microsoft, and for good reason. They have a tremendous amount riding on this tablet, on the platform, succeeding both in the Surface 2 that we're looking at here, as well as the Pro version, because really, after all, this is the future of Microsoft. It's now moving towards hardware manufacturing and really redefining what we expect out of computing. And that's something they sort of fell asleep on. And Surface has been a catch-up game from day one, at least in the tablet form. I'm not speaking in terms of the Pro, because the Pro is in a class by itself. But still very stiff competition now. The iPad Air, things like the Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 that I already compared this to, as well as other tablets that are going to be powered by the Tegra 4, but going to give you the Android app library. But you will not have this sort of keyboard. You're not going to have Office. You're not going to have that desktop class browser, SkyDrive, Skype, at least in Microsoft's purest form. So if you really find that you need those things, then Microsoft has built the perfect machine for you. And as I mentioned before, the build quality is really just a cherry on top. This is quite simply, as well as the Pro 2, some of the best built tablets that I've ever seen. £1.50, 1.4 now on this new generation, but £1.50 on the original RT. So that's part of the slim down. It's still right in line with most other tablets. The iPad Air is now at roughly £1, so that's going to be a lighter experience, but it's also a smaller tablet, 9.7 versus a 10.6-inch display. So you could argue they're not really comparable. Also, the iPad doesn't have a nifty built-in kickstand, nor does it have anywhere near the capability in terms of the covers that are offered for the iPad. Simply do not turn it into a productivity machine like we have here with the Surface 2. So really, this is a great machine. Whether or not it's warranted at its price point really comes down to, as I've mentioned before, over and over again, do you need the Windows experience in a tablet form? And if you do, then you've got a reward right here in the Surface 2, because it really does outperform much of the Android and Apple competition. The problem, again, lies in the lack of applications. So it's all about compromise, as with any other product, but Microsoft's done a really nice job here. You do have a full-size USB 3.0 port, which works just as expected. Micro HDMI out, so that you've got full 1080p video output, as you would with, again, any high-end tablet. Volume rocker, microphone, and headphone jack right there. And as I mentioned, the speakers are pretty solid. Battery life, I said earlier, it's right up there. It's where it should be. It's going to get you through the full day. And as I mentioned, my only real criticism of the battery life was the amount of time that it takes to charge. I did find that this is better suited to be an overnight charge, whereas the brand new Surface Pro 2, the Haswell version of the Pro, doesn't suffer from a very long charge time. Granted, they aren't really comparable in that regard, but just putting it out there, I'm going to say that this is, again, because the charge time relates to the fact that we're dealing with, really at its core, a tablet. And most tablets do take a long time to charge when they have very large batteries like the Surface 2. So overall, happy with all the hardware here. Wi-Fi performance has been stellar. Bluetooth solid. It just works as it should. This is relatively as bug-free an experience as you could possibly get. And in fact, if Microsoft was ever going to make a tablet and do it as best as they possibly could, I think they've delivered it here in the Surface 2. It's just going to come down, as I've mentioned before, all to that lack of applications. But even though at the time of this review, there is a clear lack of applications, I don't think that's going to last, folks. I really think Microsoft is going to play this out, go the distance, and eventually deliver a tablet that is probably going to take over the market, much like they did in the gaming industry. You know, it took them a generation, but eventually Xbox did take over the market once they went to the 360 gen. We'll see what happens now on the heels of the brand new launch. But my point is that if any company has the money, has the patience to actually wait it out and really learn from their mistakes, it is Microsoft. So really like everything about the Surface 2. If I haven't made that abundantly clear through the course of this video, it combines the best hardware and some of the best software that I've ever seen in a tablet form. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.